Hey, what's up, party people? Welcome to another action-packed week of SJU. You know, they say no news is good news, unless you're on a news show. We don't have much news today, but apparently there's a picture of Batman floating around of Michael Keaton's logo. That's exciting.
Just the logo with some jelly on it. Yeah.
So with some jelly on it? Oh, that's weird. So we figured we'd use that as an excuse to talk about a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, which is the comic book movies of the 90s, pre-MCU, when DC was the unquestioned king of the theater. I got Danielle with me. I got Eric with me. We're going to take a trip down memory lane, and then we will talk about some new stuff. Apparently Quiet Place 3 is on the way. There's a Corella sequel. Wow. And then we will, of course, do the live chat with you, the audience. So keep those questions and comments coming, and we shall respond. The 90s. what can I say about the 90s comic book wise, except it was weird and pretty horny. I think that obviously it got kicked off with I think spiritually the 90s comic book movies started with Batman 89, but that doesn't count. That's not legal. That's an 80s movie technically, even though like it's like The Matrix to me, which is like that's not a 90s movie. That's an early 2000s movie, even though it came out in 99. It's spiritually of that decade. But I want to hear just off the top, what are your guys' favorite 90s comic book films? What's top of the list for you?
Oh, for me, that's got to be Batman Returns.
Oh, there it is. Yep.
Oh, that was perfect timing. That's great. Wow, look at that. We're a fancy show. Yeah, Batman Returns is my favorite. You got all that good Catwoman. I still think it's hilarious that Michael Keaton was like, you know what? We need less Batman. Like, I love, doing the movies, but how about you make me less? So he's got like the least amount of screen time in that as I think almost any Batman in a Batman movie. Yeah, that one's easily my favorite. It is horny. It is super horned up. It's disturbing to watch Danny DeVito kind of like slobber all over Catwoman. But yeah, that one is easily my favorite. It's darker, it's dirtier. It's the reason why we got that flip to more of the campy kind of Batmans. But oh, I love it. I love the dark weirdness.
Yeah, I mean Tim Burton is unquestionably all over that movie, and it's interesting because he really did set the precedent of like movie Batman has nothing to do with comics Batman. Like Tim Burton's Batman is as weird and different from the character as previously established as Zack Snyder's is to anything ever put down in like Batman the animated series or the comics or anything like that. So he kind of that film kind of established Batman as like a canvas for auteurs to paint on.
Yeah.
And, that's as much a Tim Burton movie as it is a Batman movie. But then it was so popular and I think so beloved and awesome that kind of got meshed with the character moving forward. Like Schumacher's just kind of aping that and poorly. What's your Batman Returns take, Eric?
I freaking love it. It's my favorite Batman movie. I'm looking at Catwoman statue, Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman statue across the room. Yeah, it's so good. It's like almost like the most pure Tim Burton movie. I once wrote a paper about that for school, about like it's the most Tim Burtonist of Tim Burton movies, but in really cool way. And I think it does take Batman, right, and just kind of puts it through that Burton filter more than the first one. Like the second one is just like it's totally him, and I love it. And like I love like the line, "You're just jealous because I'm a genuine freak and you have to wear a mask. You might be right." And I'm like, yes, in the comics, it's like there's the idea that like Batman's the real identity, Bruce Wayne's the mask he puts on. But this is taking it to the next level of like, I'm jealous that you're a real freak because that's what I want to be. And it's just so fun with the way they introduce Bruce Wayne sitting, just brooding, waiting for that signal. He has no life until that signal turns on. It's just, I really think it's a cool movie. It really influenced obviously like Catwoman going forward. Such an iconic version of her. So I am very pro Batman Returns. This is a pro Batman Returns household.
Yes, it is. And they managed to do something that I find so many comic book films fail, which is juggle multiple villains. I mean, even in other Batman movies, when you have, gosh, I don't know, Mr. Freeze and Poison Ivy, you only had two there and you couldn't do it.
Bane.
This one has,
Bane.
Right, I forgot about Bane. Yeah, this one has, you got Max Schreck, an iconic walk-in performance, Penguin and Catwoman, and I'm not going to say the movie doesn't feel overstuffed because there's a lot going on, but it doesn't feel like overwhelming. It's a maximalist film, and I love that for it. Should we keep going with Eric, what your favorite comic book movie, or I guess second favorite if Batman Returns is, or should we talk about the dark side of the 90s Batman coin with the
I'll
with the
name one other
follow-ups?
favorite one because it probably would. It's a tie kind of for me between Returns, and then I gotta, if I'm being honest in my heart, I was all about The Crow, guys.
Oh, wow.
Played that
Okay.
soundtrack constantly. I saw that movie a million times, many posters.
Yeah.
Like The Crow just clicked in. It's very 90s and its aesthetic and its vibe, but it totally works. You know, yes, there's this very real tragedy that looms over it, which oddly ended up making the movie feel weightier than it ever would have. You know, we have to be honest here about that. But he's so good in it. And so, you know, there's that, you know, sadness of like, man, he could have had a great career, but what a great performance he gives in this movie. It's cool. Like the action's really cool. You know, what they're doing, it was one of those first movies for America, certainly, that I think blended the like martial arts and the gun acrobatics. Like that was something that kind of felt pretty novel in an American film at the time.
Yeah, Equilibrium owes this one royalties.
Yeah, and even
as does Batman Forever and The Matrix and Daredevil, like a lot of goth 90s.
Yeah, a guy leaping around doing cool martial arts, but he's also got a gun. And you know, the gang, the stylized, the fire it up. I'm a big Crow fan, so that's.
I mean, The Crow is a mixed movie for me. Obviously, it's legendary for the tragic reasons, but I think unquestionably it has one of the all-time great comic book movie villains in Top Dollar. Just a tip of the pimp hat to Top Dollar.
Yeah, and his family dynamic.
I'm not sure what he wanted, chaos, but man, on charisma alone, he's doing it.
Michael Wincot's got that voice, you know.
Yeah, it was so influential. I think that really defined a whole aesthetic of comic book films. It was not the overlit Marvel quippiness, that's for sure.
No.
I want to talk about one that I think that is not my favorite, but it is the one I think about the most often, which is the 1990 Captain America movie. Or was it 92?
You mean this movie?
Yes.
Oh my.
I grabbed my Blu-ray off the shelf.
Because it really shows you how far we've come and how much of an absolute bizarro world the 90s is compared to today, where Marvel was, well, they were bankrupt, right? They were like either on the verge or well in it.
Yeah.
And they got the nephew or the kid of J.D. Salinger to put on some plastic ears and pretend to be Captain America for like $40 and a ham sandwich. It is, and they did. Of course, they shot it all in Italy for
Italian Red Skull. That's right.
Red Skull, yep.
For like this mobster Red Skull. And I think that just, if you look at where DC was then and where Marvel was then, I mean, it's absolutely night and day, and it's just so fascinating. Like, never count out either of these companies, because you can see how fortunes can change, not just in comic books, but on the big screen. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Put that in my veins.
Amazing. You know, at the time, it's funny, I still will say that costume was pretty amazingly comic book accurate for that era, the strangeness of giving him fake ears aside.
Now, so we could talk about this one all day, but I won't. I do want to point out like this 90s trend of like, so Burton's Batman was huge. And Batman Returns was, I think, a success, but they wanted more, or they wanted it to be more.
And there was backlash because was it too dark for kids? That was, you know, one thing that happened.
But weirdly, like the 90s had this whole strain of these like pulpy 1930s style comic adaptations, like The Shadow, The Phantom, Dick Tracy. Was The Rocketeer a comic? Yes, it was a comic, right?
Yeah, it was a comic book. And it was actually the only one that was a recent comic. It was just set in the 30s as a retro thing at the time. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know my film history well enough, but it's like, why, with the success of Batman '89, didn't we get like the DCEU right then and there?
So weird, right? It's so strange when you look back and see that that's what they greenlit instead. They're like, nah, not the Flash. The Shadow. That's what the kids want, you know. And some of these, I love The Rocketeer, and I think Dick Tracy is a really cool looking movie that I admire. But what a strange trend, right? That they were like, That's what the kids loved about Batman, that he was a pulpy hero from the 30s. That's our main takeaway here.
They love trench coats and Stetsons, those kids.
Because I love The Rocketeer, but it wasn't the hit. None of the movies we just mentioned were hits, and none of them got sequels.
Yeah.
So yeah, very strange.
But they wouldn't try a Wonder Woman movie. Danielle, did any of that subgenre stand out to you?
Dick Tracy, I think, just because it was everywhere. Like, you couldn't get away from Dick Tracy. It had that Madonna song, which is weird because like later in life I would hear people use that for auditions, which was very odd. The sooner or later you're going to be mine. But for me as a kid, it was like, kind of because of the makeup and the way everything looked, it kind of felt like body horror. Like, that's why I didn't really connect with it, I think, as much as maybe some of the other ones did. It looked like, look at their faces. That makeup was, as a child, that makeup was grotesque. So I didn't, it didn't vibe with me very much at all.
They tried to, I don't know if you've ever seen, but they actually had the Dick Tracy characters at Disney parks briefly in 1990. And yeah, it's kind of this horrific, strange thing of them coming at you with those faces.
Yeah. Just bizarre. Like, the only Superman, non-animated Superman project we got in the entire 90s was Steel with Shaq.
And keep in mind, it's like Warner Brothers and DC were already corporate siblings. So unlike Marvel, there was nothing there was a pipeline that was there that they could have made all these other movies, and yet Steel was the only thing that they got a movie.
The other trend going through the 90s comic book films of like dark and weird, but also comedies. Like, I think honestly one of my favorites of that era is The Mask, Jim Carrey's The Mask, which is I don't know, probably viewed today as probably like a cautionary tale about becoming a pickup artist or something. But I remember as a kid just being like, this is hilarious, and Cameron Diaz is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. That movie made a big impression. As someone who liked cartoons, pulling off a complete live action cartoon like that definitely made a mark.
That was a zeitgeist movie. Like, that was like Jim Carrey's the 1994 of Jim Carrey is a year we could all only hope for. Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber all came out that year, all huge hits. But yeah, The Mask was like I don't think when they greenlit it they realized it'd become this like giant summer movie. But yeah, it was the right place, right guy for sure. The right place and right time.
Right guy. You had Jim Carrey, you had Cameron Diaz, and you had the Swing revival of the midnight. There's like 3 lightning bolts in a bottle at the same time. And then the only other one that I would be remiss if I didn't talk about, because it really is always near and dear to my heart, is Blade. I mean, on the Marvel side of things, they were not going to come out of the gate with Spider-Man. They were not going to come out of the gate with, they tried with Captain America, and they thought, you know what? Let's do Blade. And God bless them. They didn't take the right lessons from it, which is to give Wesley Snipes everything and make everything R-rated. But this just really stands out to me as one of my favorite comic book movies of all time, and kind of a one-off. I don't think we've gotten anything like it before or since. Maybe Blade 2, but this is kind of a unique 90s gem, right? Or would you say this is like a Disney Plus show now? Like, has anything recaptured the Blade magic for you since?
No, because it had that, for one thing, it was rated R, so it felt like naughty. It was like a comic book movie, but it was like, ooh, rated R. And again, it is so 90s with the darkness and with the performances, and I don't know. Nothing for me. I don't know if it's a Disney Plus show now. I think that it's that movie showed, I feel like it showed that comic book movies were more possible, and I feel like that kind of led us onto the road to some of the further Marvel comic book movies. Like, you get, because Blade works, it begets your Spider-Mans and your X-Men's.
I don't know which was first, but I think it probably begat Spawn, right?
Oh, it definitely begat
Spawn. Spawn the movie came out the year before, I think.
Yeah. Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Oh, oof.
And that kind of sheds some light on why we're like, why weren't they making Superman and Flash movies and stuff like that? Then, of course, like, this was the era of Image Comics. Like, this was the era of super gory covered in chains and pouches. Like, if you were making a comic book movie, it would be stupid to not make something that felt like that, because comics were booming and everybody had like muscles on top of muscles and was shooting each other through the chest with laser guns and stuff like that. This was not a time to do like like a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. I think would not have been well received, or no one would have had the vision to bring that out in the 90s.
Yeah, I think Blade is perfectly. I love Blade. That first movie is actually one of my top favorite Marvel movies. Still, it's so cool, and I actually think the fact that it opened in between The Crow and The Matrix makes a lot of sense, because I think there's some Crow influence there, but it kind of leads into The Matrix with some of its aesthetics as well. The fact that it was a very obscure character, the movie wasn't promoted around it being based on a Marvel comic at all, and a lot of people could see that movie and not even realize if they weren't reading the credits carefully, because there certainly wasn't a big Marvel logo at the beginning of that movie. That all kind of worked really well for it. And I think the one thing it influences today is the fact that, yeah, we can make anyone into a giant movie star. Like with the MCU, it's like we can now do Shang-Chi and Rocket Raccoon and Eternals, because Blade, like before Spider-Man and X-Men, was this big hit movie that based on a character that no one who didn't read Marvel comics would know who Blade is, you know? So that it was just, and I loved it. I just thought it was so cool. Again, it's one of those things like The Crow where just the movie finishes, you're like, that was freaking awesome. So yeah, I think that movie is super influential, and also, yeah, really set the tone for like Marvel can, if you do it right, you can make like a major like star character out of anyone, even if they seem super obscure as a comic book character.
I think we're, though, painting a little too rosy of a picture of this era. So I'd like to hear what are some of your least favorites of that decade, or the biggest flops or mistakes, because man, it was not all Blades. And I think, and actually I do have kind of a soft spot for the Spawn movie, because it's just so bizarre and so intense. Specifically John Leguizamo just eating roaches or whatever, eating grubs every scene. But did anything like completely put you off of comic book movies for good back then? Or what was the most egregious?
It didn't put me off, but I was going to say the Spawn movie. The Spawn movie was the one that I just didn't. Again, it was like all the body horror, and that last act just looks like, even then it did not look great. Like all that stuff when they were in hell or whatever. It did not look good.
It's a bad cutscene.
It's a bad cutscene.
PS1 era, yeah.
So that one I would say was the one that for me was like, it didn't put me off of comic books or comic book movies, because I was like huge into comic books. But look at that.
he went for it, man. He committed. He always does. But yeah, that was a lot going on in there. Yeah. Eric, what's your worst of the decade?
Yes, I thought Spawn was really bad. I understand that this movie's kind of spun around on the nostalgia wheel, that some people were like, hey, I have some love for it, but Batman and Robin was just such a miscalculation to me, of like not what anyone wanted at that point, and not done well. Because I'm like, hey, you can make funny Batman. In the 60s, they did it really well. But that movie's just not working. But the one that really stands out to me as far as like people adapting things just to adapt them and not looking at what makes them work was Judge Dredd, the Stallone Judge Dredd, because you have this fun, cool, satirical, dark comic, and it becomes like a Sylvester Stallone vanity movie where he takes the helmet off him immediately, and Rob Schneider's his buddy, and it just was like, no, guys, this is not. And eventually we got a really cool Dredd movie, which also bombed, but that Judge Dredd is just this was a time when no one was thinking about like doing it right. They're just like, this is a thing. We can adapt this.
Whenever I think I like that movie, I just then remind myself I'm thinking of Demolition Man, and that clears that up.
That's the good one. That's the good one.
With Roth Schneider.
Yeah. It's such a strange time, though, the 90s, because they were all these like indie comics were getting adaptations. Like the fact that, like we weren't getting Green Lantern or The Flash or Spider-Man, but we got Barbed Wire. It was the Barbed Wire movie, and I like Tank Girl's one of those so weird I kind of like it movies, even though I don't think it's a good movie.
Tank Girl,
Kangaroos, Ice-T, what's not to love?
Yeah.
For me, it's something we didn't get to call out in the best of the decade, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, I think, snuck in there by the end of the 90s, and 1 and 2 are really good and stayed true to the darker source material of the Turtles.
Especially that first one, yeah.
But the third one, I think they switched suit shops, like they stopped using Jim Henson suits. Everything looks like it's made of styrofoam. And they don't have, for, you know, in a franchise where you've got like Shredder, Krang, Baxter Stockman, you've got all these amazing villains, they didn't use anything. Oh god. But get that off the screen. Oh, it's horrifying.
They brought back Elias Koteas as Casey, but then no, they didn't use him well. So.
Yeah, not at all. And then they sent him immediately back to Japan. It's stupid.
You know what? You know, it's a really good one that I just thought of, though. I wanted to throw out there because no one thinks of it as a comic book movie. Men in Black. Is like a really great, well done, fun summer movie, and based on an obscure comic book that now no one's doing it. Marvel owns it because they bought Malibu, but they're not doing anything with it. But yeah, in the midst of like not getting much good stuff in the late 90s, with exceptions like Blade, Men in Black does stick out to me as like, hey, that one was really cool.
Totally. Well, there you go. I think that was a decent summary of the highs and lows of the decade. We didn't talk about the Generation X unreleased. Was it a TV show or a movie?
That was a TV movie that aired on Fox. Yeah,
I tape recorded that thing and watched it.
Same here. From the director of Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Yeah,
starring Max
or the Max show on Liquid TV. So there's obviously more stones to turn over. But let us know in the comments what we missed and what your faves or least faves were. And thank you for watching. Clearly, you'll watch us talk about anything if you're still here at this point. Please subscribe. Please hit the like and the bell so you never miss another thing. There is some contemporary news here in the 20s. So according to the playlist, Paramount Pictures has already set aside March 23rd, 2023, 3/23/23, as the date for a new feature film set in the A Quiet Place world, the Quiet Verse, to be helmed by director Jeff Nichols and with a story by Office Jim. So this is going to be like a real franchise. I still haven't seen the sequel. I didn't want to lead with this because I haven't seen the follow-up. Have you, Eric?
I have, and I've seen it twice, and I very much enjoy it.
Really? So, and you think this has verse potential?
I'm a little nervous on the verse of it all, because you know, it's ultimately what they're doing is a variation on like a zombie, you know, post-apocalyptic, you know, just walking around in that dystopia thing, and they do it really well. And so far we've focused on this family. I'm not saying you can't do other stories that'll be cool in it, but I hope they don't go too fast and too furious, although I love that franchise with these spinoffs now that Paramount I think is like, oh, we've got something people are really into with this. I'm surprised they're doing this before the third one just because the second is such a hit.
Okay, so yeah, so this is going to be a spinoff. Danielle, have you seen the sequel?
I have not seen the sequel yet. That's on my list of stuff to watch this weekend.
Okay, so if now the sequel, Eric, is this a different sense that they can't use, or is it the same one?
The same one.
Okay.
Same one.
They still have to be quiet.
Right. And they haven't done a bird. What was it called? Bird Box. They haven't crossed
Bird
over.
Box. Yeah,
they haven't crossed.
I'm sure that's
There's
in the works.
no crossover yet, but we can only hope that Emily Blunt and Sandra Bullock will run into each other out in the woods at some point.
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely the risk for something for a place like Paramount that has precious few movie franchises. They've run the Turtles into the ground, although that's coming back with from Seth Rogen, so that's different. And what else does Paramount have?
Well, Mission Impossible is their one big thing. Transformers, they're going to try to reboot because that had run its course. And then Star Trek TV, it's doing well again, but movies, they're having trouble getting that back off the ground.
Yeah. So leave it to them to just take any little ember of something and just be like, this is it, and then just kind of wring whatever life is left out of it. But if Quiet Place 2 is good, then I'll enjoy the ride. I will actually check that out because I don't want to say wasted my time, but mixedly enjoyed my time watching Corella, which already has a sequel in development. Wow. So this movie happened. I think we have a lot to say that you might be hearing about shortly in an Honest Trailer episode. But the idea of continuing this Cruella, which, spoiler alert, is not the Cruella of the film, or is it? Because we're getting a sequel. Do you want to see the eventual turn towards dog murder that I feel like this has to take, or no?
No, I am on record saying I don't want it to turn towards puppy murder. I don't think we're gonna get that from this. I think it'll be more of I don't know if this is a spoiler. It's just kind of the mood of it is, it's a little punk rock. So I think we're gonna get a little bit more of that, like, hot punk rock Cruella. But yeah, I don't know how they would turn this into puppy murder. It would be interesting to see how they do that.
They could just ignore it. I mean, this movie was essentially the third act of Zoolander, where it's like they're breakdance fighting, but for 2 hours of it's just her like fashion bombing other people. So I guess it doesn't really have to have much to do with dogs at all, except for when they drop kick her parents off of it. Sorry, so many spoilers for Corella if you haven't seen it. Eric, are you invested in the Corella verse, or do you think the story was wrapped up in the first one?
I am. I really like Corella. I actually really liked Corella. I have some quibbles. There's those songs were coming a little too heavy. They could have laid off on a few of them, the needle drops. But I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the vibe of it and the tone of it, and Emma Thompson getting to like be the super evil one in that movie. I do think it's a big debate. I've been on Twitter. I've talked to a lot of people about it. It's like, does this have to be the Corella of the animated movie? Can it just be this is a different version who maybe never kills puppies? And I'm cool with it. Not this can be a puppy killing free Corella who's doesn't go down that route. We've seen so many iterations of other characters. I'm cool with it. So yeah, I did enjoy this movie. I think one of the only things that also annoyed me about the first one, as we're going to call it that now, is some of the ways they dropped in some other characters from 101 Dalmatians, because they didn't need to do that, but I think they felt they had to do that. But I would be up for more of Emma Stone doing this. I made a weird comparison here, and I don't know if anyone else watched this show, but Bates Motel, which ended up being like, it's the origin story of Norman Bates, but then clearly was doing its own thing to the point that they retold Psycho, but the same things didn't happen. They zigged and zagged from what you thought was going to happen. I think that's what they can do with this Corella. It's like, it doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 or 101 as far as where they go with this.
Yeah, they can do whatever at this point. I mean, my annoyance is that we were all baited and switched, but now that I've been baited and know that this is not Cruella at all, this is like a fashion revenge story. Okay, you can start there and just kind of do your own thing. Like, stop. Let's not try to force this into the 101 Dalmatians mold. Just make stuff about Emma Stone making Hunger Games dresses. So more to come on that in the next coming weeks, I promise. We also have some quick casting news. Issa Rae is going to be Jessica Drew / Spider-Woman in Spider-Verse 2. I was like, oh, that'd be cool for her to get a live-action comic book role. But she will be voicing Spider-Woman in Spider-Verse 2. And Donnie Yen is going to be in John Wick 4, along with Keanu Reeves, who will obviously be back for that. Cool? We cool with that? We're cool with that, right?
I like both casting, and I think it's a savvy move by Stone. Not that an idea like Into the Spider-Verse doesn't automatically mean Spider-Woman could come into play, but we know Olivia Wilde is developing a live action movie to direct. So it's like, hey, let's introduce her first in animation, and then we can have the live action version after. And Donnie Yen is awesome. So and I think they say he's going to be like John Wick's old buddy. They gone through some stuff together, and now John needs to go to him for some help. So.
Wasn't there just some Matrix 4 casting? No,
Christina Ricci.
Yeah, all right. Danielle, anything about that or Christina Ricci being in Matrix 4? That
mostly
seems
just
perfect.
That does seem pretty great. Issa Rae is incredibly funny, and I think that she'll fit into Spider-Verse very, very well. I'm very excited for her to get in her first superhero thing, and hopefully that continues. Yeah, she is hilarious.
She is. Insecure is the best show of like following around a comedian, and like the border between like the character and the person is thin, and like it's the best of those types of shows for sure if you're not watching it. All right, so y'all have been talking while we've been talking, and here's what you've asked. Adam Hulbert writes, what movie delayed by COVID was not worth the wait? New Mutants is mine. I gotta agree with that.
New Mutants a COVID delay. It was delayed so many times pre-COVID.
Yeah. God, there were so many. But yeah, nothing is worth the New Mutants wait. Absolutely nothing. and it wasn't one of those situations like where you go to a food truck that's cool and you're like, oh, I have to wait 4 hours, so of course this is going to taste good because I'm so hungry by the end of the line. I think this was just a bad movie that didn't get made better by the wait. What other big COVID delays were there, and were any of them like didn't do it for you when you finally saw the movie?
I mean, first of all, it's funny. I will say a mild New Mutants defender because it's not a movie I'll go to bat for. I'll just be like, yeah, it was okay. But I think the things that are mostly like weren't worth the wait are the stuff, not all, but a lot of the stuff that they sent to streaming, you can kind of see like, oh yeah, they kind of saw the writing on the wall with that. Like I watched some of Without Remorse and I was like, and I love Michael B. Jordan, but I was just like, yeah. This feels like a movie that probably they kind of knew wasn't going to be like a home run if it had gone on theatrical release without COVID. So stuff like that where you're just kind of like, yeah, okay. There's a couple others where I would have liked to have seen them in the theater, but that is a couple. I'm blanking on others as well. But a lot of the stuff that they sold to streaming kind of felt like they kind of knew, not always, but they kind of knew in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it's a good point because I feel like the things that got delayed for a lot of them haven't come out yet. We haven't seen Avatar 2. We haven't seen, Jurassic whatever's next.
Right.
All these things that got postponed. And the ones that they didn't believe in, they just kind of plopped on streaming, like your Artemis Fowls. That one didn't get COVID delayed, but that got COVID dumped on us.
And did that. Disney basically, they kind of lucked out because they didn't get as much attention for what a stinker that was by putting it out there. Yeah.
Oh man,
I will not be defending Artemis Fowl.
Yeah.
We're getting some Wonder Woman 84 and Mulan in the chat, just as picks for other movies that were a little underwhelming, I think, once they came out.
Yeah. But I think we'll see for the ones that they Avatar 2 will be the litmus test for me of whether I'm gonna ever go to a movie theater again. Whether I believe in the power of film will be.
You got a year and a
James
half.
Cameron's hands. Yeah,
Yes.
Just a year and a half left. All right, moving on. James Blunt asks, "What director do you want to get a blank check movie?" Well, I want Denis Villeneuve to keep getting them, but I fear that after Dune, his blank check will run out. Because I think that they just, for some reason, he gets hundreds of millions of dollars to make movies that will never make their money back. And so whatever compromat he has on studio heads, I hope he gets more so he can keep making his weird films. But beyond that, I don't know. Danielle, Eric, you have a blank check director?
Well, since we mentioned her, I want Issa Rae to get some money because, like, I think just as a developer, and she's been doing a lot of producing, and bringing up these great shows and kind of helping people up the ladder. I want to see her get some more money for that, so that she can do more of that. And I want to see her. I want to see what something directed by Issa Rae with money looks like. I just think I would be interested because, like, her Los Angeles is my Los Angeles. So I want to see something that feels that it's both grounded, plus it's got like some money behind it. Maybe this will be another one where it's like, hey, they actually went outside and it's very exciting,
Yeah.
I guess one that jumping to mind for me is kind of happening right now, which is Adam Wingard, just because I love You're Next and The Guest so much. And I definitely enjoyed Godzilla vs. Kong. I didn't think it was like amazing, but I thought it was, he did a super fun job with it. And now he's directing Face Off 2 and Thundercats. And there's like 2 other giant projects he's attached to right now. I do hope going forward, he can kind of interweave that indie quirkiness a little more into it. But it seems like right now they are giving Adam Wingard a lot of blank checks, multiple studios.
Ryan wrote in the Zoom chat, The Lonely Island. But I will say, I think that their budgetary constraints actually make their movies better. Like the bees scene from Popstar is way funnier than actually seeing it.
Yeah. And it's not like Popstar felt like a minimalist movie either. You know, like they're able to accomplish pretty outlandish things, but I just think, give them 200 million and actually, I just want to see what happens.
I would like to give a blank check to they're known as the Daniels, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. They made I think they made the Turn Down for What video, but they also made Swiss Army Man and The Death of Dick Long, which are well, not Death of Dick Long, but Swiss Army Man is like a fairly effects heavy film and it's like very bizarre, and every one of their movies is incredibly unique. And I'm really excited for their new one coming out with Michelle Yeoh and Jamie Lee Curtis. So I hope that they get to make the films of their dreams, because they're not constrained by reality in any way, shape, or form. All right, final question. D.A. Baracus asks, how did you score the Mayweather versus Jake Paul fight? I didn't watch it. Danielle, give us our fight night recap yes. of this crucial piece of YouTube culture.
Oh boy. So what happened is exactly what you expect to have happened. With one exception, because everyone was like waiting for him to knock Jake Paul out, and there's no way, there's got to be an agreement that he's just going to let him rock for a second. And so he did, and it wound up actually going 8 rounds. Jake Paul did a lot of, I don't know what this move is. I don't watch boxing, but I was obsessed with this fight all week. And I could not tell you why. I think it was mostly the arguments of people online. Not so much the pro or con, like who's going to win, Logan or Mayweather, in so much as the arguments of, is this going to destroy boxing?
Boxing died in like the 50s.
But yeah, so Mayweather won. Just if you look at the percentages, Mayweather won. But they both win because they both came out of this making a lot of money. And now Jake Paul gets to say that he went 8 rounds with Mayweather.
With the distance.
And the reason that they asked this is because because it's an exhibition, there was no official winner, and there wouldn't have been really a winner, official or unofficial, especially for betting purposes, unless one of them got knocked out. So no one got knocked out. So if you were hoping to see Jake Paul get knocked out, sorry, but Mayweather did win that one. I am obsessed.
Now, isn't his brother a boxer too? Are both Paul's brother boxers? Okay, that's like what
I know that
the YouTuber to boxer pipeline has been well established.
I know that because when Logan Paul was doing his nonsense with WWE a few months ago, they made sure to show his brother also training during a little vignette they did, to show that they're both
this
scrappers.
Has to be culminating in like a Paul v. Paul thing, right? Like Warrior.
It's gotta be. Jake Paul wants to fight Mayweather, and in fact, during one of the heads up, he stole Mayweather's hat. And was like, "I got your hat."
Mayweather's hat.
Ryan's suggesting quite a brawl there in the chat, Spencer.
Dan Murrell versus Jake Paul.
The world needs to see it.
As much as I want to see Jake Paul knocked out, and as much as I believe Dan would commit himself. I don't know.
He'd be prepared. He'll defeat him with facts and research and thought out arguments.
Look at the stats I've got.
Yeah, argument done. That's true. So there you go. Post in the comments who you'd like to see us fight. But keep in mind that none of us will train for it. So try to make us look good here, or at least have us make a lot of money. I'd let Jake Paul knock me out for $1 million. I think.
Oh yeah.
Who among us would not?
Oh, absolutely.
Did it for the memes. Well, thank you guys for sticking with us today. Hopefully some news happens this week. And we will be right here to report it. We'll be doing a Honest Trail commentary tomorrow for an exciting one coming out that's been very heavily requested. And then I think we'll be covering that Loki show later on this week in some form or another. So more to come. But thank you for spending your Monday morning with us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.